So there's a lot of jutsus in Naruto. That's one of its biggest appeals. The list, when you take every jutsu used in anime, manga, the light novels, and every piece of content, totals over 2,000. And because that, we have a wide berth of very interesting jutsus that do very different things. But within that list of jutsus, there is a separate, much smaller list of jutsu. This is a list of very powerful jutsu that are dangerous to be used. Yes, of course, today we are talking about kinjutsu, aka forbidden jutsu. But what makes a jutsu forbidden? What happens if you use a forbidden jutsu, and why isn't 1,000 Years of Death on there? These are all good questions that I'm gonna answer in just 1 second. Before I get to answering any questions, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And while we're supporting Nick, guys, I have 2 other YouTube pages. NC Gamer 23, where instead of talking anime, I play video games, and Hammer's Collection, where instead of talking anime, I unbox things from it. So the term forbidden jutsu tends to get thrown around a lot over the duration of Naruto. Deidara's got one, Kakuzo's got one, Sasori's got one, even Naruto uses one. Actually, in fact, Naruto uses 2. But what makes a jutsu forbidden, and is there consequences for using them? And also, what is every forbidden jutsu, and what does it do? See, I haven't done a video like this in a long time. When I first started this page, I used to just talk about every single Jinchuriki, or every tailed beast, or every Sharingan user for 35 minutes. So today you could say we're getting back to my roots, because on top of telling you what a forbidden jutsu is and what happens if you use one, I'm going to be explaining what every single forbidden jutsu in Naruto is. This is going to be a long video, so let's get to it. Forbidden jutsus are pretty self-explanatory. They're jutsus that are no longer allowed to be taught or used. But how were the first jutsus forbidden? Who were the people who decided to ban certain jutsus, and why? Well, the term forbidden jutsu came around after the Warring States period, after the hidden villages propped up. Essentially, all of the villages came together and decided to ban certain jutsus in order to stop unnecessary levels of bloodshed. This was done in order to save lives and maintain peace. And if we're being entirely real, some of the jutsus that spun out of the Warring States period, like Flying Raijin and Edo Tensei, probably deserved to be banned because of the sheer level of devastation you could do to an opposing army with these jutsus. Tobirama also got canceled over mutually multiplying explosive tags, but that's just piling on. Tobirama wasn't the only war criminal coming out of the Warring States period, though. Izanami and Izanagi were also banned immediately. But one could argue that all jutsus can be used to kill somebody at high rates. I mean, Fireball Jutsu, one of the most common jutsus we see throughout the entirety of Naruto, can literally burn you to death. So there's got to be some sort of rules outside of it kills lots of people to forbid a jutsu. And there sort of is. As we understand it, there's basically 6 reasons that a jutsu can become forbidden. The first reason is probably the most common and clear to your average viewer. Essentially, this reason states that if the jutsu in question puts the user in danger, then it will be kinjutsu. For examples of this, think Rasenshuriken or Reverse Lotus. The second reason is if the technique has severe chakra requirements to use, like multiple shadow clones. Essentially, if using this jutsu will leave the user with a severely depleted amount of chakra and therefore endangering them, it's kinjutsu. The third reason is if the jutsu violates the laws of nature, like Edo Tensei, bringing the dead back to life. The fourth reason is kind of a spin-off of the first reason. If the technique requires you to use your own life or somebody else's life as a sacrifice, kinjutsu. For this, think Death Reaper Seal or one's own life jutsu that Granny Chiyo uses. The fifth reason is oddly specific. It's the destruction of a Sharingan. Izanami and Izanagi are banned because they blind a Sharingan when used. The Uchiha decided to make them forbidden because they hold their Sharingans as prized treasures, so destroying them with a jutsu would be forbidden. And the last reason is large-scale destruction. Any jutsu that can destroy a large area immediately is banned, like Fury, which is technically filler, but we'll still cover it. Okay, so these are all the reasons that a jutsu would be banned. So what happens if you use one of these banned jutsus? Nothing. Like I've already stated, Naruto uses multiple shadow clone jutsu all throughout the duration of Naruto, but they believe that he gets a pass because he's the only person who can use it safely. When Tsunade labels the Rasenshuriken as kinjutsu, she just basically is like, hey Naruto, you shouldn't use that, and he's like, I'm still gonna. Both Minato and Hiruzen use the Death Reaper Seal, but we're called heroes for using it, so it's just kind of words. It's like how jaywalking is illegal. Technically, you shouldn't do it, and maybe if you find the really mean cop, he'll yell at you about it. Maybe even write you a ticket, but 99.99999% of the time, you're gonna be fine. So now that we know when the category of forbidden jutsus was made, what the criteria are, and what happens when you use them, the only thing left to do is to talk about every forbidden jutsu in the show. Shout out to Anime Senpai Comparisons, because they are the only person I've seen that's actually made a list of all of the kinjutsu altogether. And legit, I just couldn't find one anywhere. First up, Akata. Akata is an earth-release kinjutsu from the Land of Stone. Akata are from Boruto, and they're weaponized earth-release golems. Essentially, they are independent and sentient mud clones that have been weaponized in order to protect Iwa from external threats without using shinobi. They have the capability to phase into the ground and drag people into the ground with them, suffocating them. On top of that, they're low jonin level fighters. These were considered kinjutsu because they go against the laws of nature. Essentially, it gave sentience to mud, and that isn't how life is usually created. Because of that, they were labeled a kinjutsu. On to the next one. Second on the list is the animal cursed seal. This is our first filler jutsu. The animal cursed seal works a bit like Orochimaru's cursed seal, but unlike Orochimaru's heaven or earth cursed seal, this isn't acquired by a bite from Orochimaru. Essentially, you're bitten by a snake, and that snake imprints a tattoo on you that tells you how to make a potion. And once you make that potion out of like 20 very difficult to acquire ingredients, you take that potion and you acquire a cursed seal. And once you drink this potion, you acquire the level 1 of the cursed seal, just like with the heaven and or earth cursed seal. And with this level 1, you acquire enhanced muscle growth, speed, durability. You also begin to take on slight appearance of an animal. In Mizuki's case, you know that guy who attacked Naruto for stealing the scroll and Ruka had to protect him by stopping that big old shuriken? Yeah, that guy. He grew tiger stripes on his arm. And then eventually, as the cursed seal is with them for longer, they acquire a second stage. And this is when the furry bait comes in. Mizuki, who had mixed his potion with tiger genetics, became a tiger. However, this animal cursed seal was still in beta testing, and therefore the explosive growth and power was actually at the detriment of your cells. So once you were done being furry bait, your body would return to normal and your body would basically be destroyed. And therefore this was labeled kinjutsu because it aligned with the first reason for something to be called kinjutsu. It put the user at risk. After that, we have Antlion ninja arts ephemeral. This was also filler. This technique allows the user to make 4 chakra wings that makes them resemble a firefly. But these techniques don't only allow the user to fly, they can also fire powerful blasts from them. However, this technique can only be used once, because the technique drains you of so much chakra it leaves you in a near-death state. This makes sense because also, while you use this technique, you can transport yourself anywhere instantaneously, just like flying Raijin. So it was labeled kinjutsu once again because it put the user in danger. You're not gonna believe it, but this next jutsu is also filler. The next kinjutsu is Casualty puppet. This technique, like a lot of the ones on this list, was developed by Orochimaru. Essentially, this technique allows the user to absorb a freshly killed corpse. And once they've absorbed this freshly killed corpse, they can use that corpse's abilities. So let's say I kill you, but you know fireball, and I don't. I can absorb your corpse, and now I can use your corpse to spit fireballs at people. The only problem with this technique, outside of the fact that you have to kill somebody and absorb them, is that using it slowly warps your brain and makes you go crazy. So this technique was banned for A, going against the laws of nature by bringing a dead person back to life, sort of, and also putting the user in danger. The next ninjutsu is, let me hear you say it, filler! Our next kinjutsu is called chakra threads, and not the chakra threads you're thinking about. Obviously, when we talk about chakra threads, you probably think of the chakra threads that puppeteers use to control their puppets. That's how Sasori and Granny Chiyo and Kankuro are able to connect these chakra threads from their fingers to their puppets and control them in battle. But we're not talking about those chakra threads. Those chakra threads are completely fine. We're talking about other chakra threads. And yes, both the techniques are called chakra threads. Don't look at me. These chakra threads are different from regular chakra threads, sort of, mostly in the way that they're used. While the chakra threads that Granny Chiyo, Kankuro, and Sasori use are used to control puppets, these chakra threads are meant to connect 2 hearts. Essentially, members of the Fuma clan are able to cast chakra threads onto an enemy's heart and tie it to their own. This technique means now that they're connected via this chakra thread heart to heart, that any damage incurred to the Fuma clan user using the chakra threads on an enemy will then be reflected upon the person they've cast their chakra threads on. It's Hidan's ability. However, the Fuma clan member is not immortal, so if they die, the person who their chakra thread is connected to also dies. And this jutsu was banned because it puts the user at risk. Well, sort of. I guess technically it doesn't put the user at risk because that would still just be the enemy. Like, the user casting these chakra threads technically isn't increasing the danger they're in at all. They would still have to be killed by an external force. Whatever, it's filler. This next jutsu is, let me hear y'all in the back, filler! But this is a different kind of filler because this is movie filler, not anime filler. So it's actually technically not filler, it's just not canon. The next kinjutsu is the chimera technique. And no, not Chow Tucker's genius work trying to make dog girls. No, we're talking chimeras in Naruto. This technique was seen in Naruto the movie, The Will of Fire. I'll give you guys one guess as to how the chimera technique works. Essentially, it allows Hiriko, who is a missing of Konoha, to combine the body parts of separate organisms into one body. You know, like a chimera. And once these different body parts are combined, a new synthetic body is made. Where Hiriko's genius really steps up with this jutsu though, is that the Kekkei Genkai and the abilities of every body part added to the chimera is usable by the chimera. And because of this, when Hiriko uses this technique on himself and makes himself a chimera, he has 4 separate Kekkei Genkai: Storm, Dark, Steel, and Swift. However, a chimera can only absorb 4 Kekkei Genkai. I mean, it can absorb a 5th, but there's a bunch of rules I don't want to go over. The chimera basically just works like Casualty puppet, except it's more animalistic. Our next jutsu is... it's canon, but it's canon to Boruto. Our next kinjutsu is the corpse clone technique. This technique allows the user to assume the identities of its victims. Essentially, this is like transformation jutsu on an entirely different level. The user has to unhinge their jaw and eat the living brain of their victim. Yeah, like living brain is important, but it's called the corpse clone technique. I don't know which is which. But regardless, after the user eats their victim's brain, they can flawlessly recreate their appearance within themselves. They get all of their abilities, all of their memories. It is a perfect transformation. If a user of this managed to somehow catch Kakashi off guard and ate his brain, they could just become Kakashi. They could use Kamui and Chidori and Purple Lightning. I understand Kamui and Purple Lightning aren't getting used at the same time, guys. On top of this, once you make the transformation, there's no more work you need to do. You get to be transformed forever, until hypothetically somebody shuts down your ability to use chakra, and then you would go back. But as long as you have a constant flow of chakra, you're fine. This jutsu is considered kinjutsu because it requires a sacrifice. After corpse clone technique, we have creation rebirth, which is very canon. Creation rebirth is widely misregarded as the strength of 100 or Byakuya seal. But in fact, creation rebirth and the strength of 100 seal are completely different jutsus. It's just Tsunade needs an access to an insane amount of chakra to use creation rebirth, and the same goes for Sakura, so they have to release their strength of 100 seal simultaneously. Creation rebirth was created by Tsunade with the resolution to save all of her teammates and herself on the battlefield. Essentially, by releasing an insane amount of chakra all at once, she's able to increase the mitotic regeneration of her cells to such a rate that any injury she incurs heals instantly. This has healed entire sever arms in Sakura's case and literally brought a bisected Tsunade back together in the war arc. As long as creation rebirth is active, the user quite literally cannot die. However, this technique doesn't heal your old cells. It creates new ones. And since your cells only have a certain amount of mitotic splits in their entire lives, it shortens the user's lifespan. Essentially, by using creation rebirth, you are accelerating your body's clock. A wound that would take a week to heal is healing in seconds, but that's because your body is now a week older. And because of this, technically, by using creation rebirth, you are shortening your lifespan. And therefore it violates the first rule. It puts the user at risk. But Tsunade's the Hokage, and she told Naruto not to use a kinjutsu because it was dangerous, so what are the rules? That was fun how those 2 last jutsus were canon, right? Don't get used to it. This one's filler. Up next, we have the curse mandala. This one, just like the chakra threads, is specific to the Fuma clan. This technique works by essentially putting somebody in a chakra pyramid. And as the user moves their hands closer together, that chakra pyramid gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And eventually, if the chakra pyramid gets too small, it crushes the person inside of it and kills them. However, to maintain this jutsu, you have to hold a triangle-shaped hand seal the entire time, and if your will falters or the person you're trying to trap is just too strong, they can destroy it. Only problem is, if they destroy it, it releases a large blast and destroys everything around it, including the user of the cursed mandala. So for the 6th reason, aka large-scale destruction and potentially harm to the user, the first reason this jutsu is a kinjutsu. Don't worry, it's not the bit about crushing someone slowly to death. No, it's just if it explodes or it hurts the person who's using it. This technique is considered a close relative to dust release, a Kekkei Toda that combines earth, wind, and fire. However, since dust release can't hurt the user, it's all good, even though it vaporizes you on a cellular level. The next 2 jutsus are canon. I say 2 because we're gonna do them simultaneously because they're basically the same thing. The next 2 kinjutsu are from Orochimaru. Who else? This might as well just be a video about him. And they are the Cursed Heaven and Cursed Earth seals. Now you're probably wondering to yourself,
I thought Orochimaru just handed out cursed seals.
and you're kind of right. He's just got a couple different varieties. However, the only person we've ever seen receive a Cursed Seal of Earth is Kimimaro. Everybody else, like Anko, Sasuke, the Sound Village 4, they all received the Cursed Seal of Heaven. How is the Cursed Seal of Earth different from the Cursed Seal of Heaven? it's not. There's 2 levels to the curse technique. In the first level of the curse seal, lines begin to leak from wherever the curse seal was placed that increase your ninjutsu capabilities, your chakra, your durability, all of that. And then if you go to the second level of the transformation, you take on animalistic appearances, your skin color changes, and all of the things that happened in the level 1 transformation happen again, but way stronger in the level 2. And that's exactly what happens when you use the curse seal of heaven. There's 2 levels. The first level you get lines, the second level you get a skin color change and animalistic appearances, and all of your abilities are boosted. However, these techniques are banned for more than one reason. 1, they go against the laws of nature. Orochimaru leaves a little bit of his genetic material and his chakra in every single curse mark, so he can then use those curse marks to be revived later on if he ever dies. That goes against the laws of nature. 2, they technically require a sacrifice. By placing a curse seal on somebody, you make them run the gauntlet of a 1 in 10 chance of dying. Only 10% of people who receive curse seals survive. So yeah, just another entry from Orochimaru. By the way, if you guys want to know more about curse seals, I actually did a whole video about them. It's right here. The next 5 jutsus are canon. The first up is Daytime Tiger. Daytime Tiger is arguably one of the more interesting entries onto this list because it is a purely taijutsu move, which makes it eerily reminiscent of a forbidden martial arts move like crotch kicks or eye gouging. But essentially the way that Daytime Tiger works is that after a user of the 8 gates opens up to the 7th gate, they can use this technique. You have to be open up to the 7th gate because of how fast this punch happens. This technique is confusing. At least it's confusing for a strictly taijutsu move. Essentially, a user of the 8 gates has to stretch one of their hands out in front of them and then punch the back of that hand with their own other fist. This then creates a wave of air pressure off of their open hand. They then do a hand seal that is in the shape of a tiger, and this launches that air pressure at their opponent. And that air pressure, as it moves, will condense into a singular point, becoming a spear of condensed air. And then this air pressure can explode on command, creating a massive explosion, one so large that it dwarfed Turtle Island. This technique is forbidden though because it puts the user at significant risk of bodily harm. I mean, you know how fast a fist moves in 7th gate, right? Well, they have to punch the back of their own hand, and therefore it's highly likely that you will shatter many bones while using this technique. Also, it violates the large-scale destruction law. So yeah, don't use it, or do, because nobody really cares. Next up is my personal favorite jutsu. I have a tattoo of it. This is the Dead Demon Consuming Seal, aka the Reaper Death Seal. This is a jutsu created by the Uzumakis in order to make sure that any strength of opponent could be killed. Essentially, this jutsu works by summoning a Shinigami to the earthly plane, and in exchange for the user's own soul, the Shinigami will reach out and grab the soul of your opponent and slowly pull it into you. And once your opponent's soul is entirely out of their body, it is sealed inside of the Shinigami's stomach along with your own, where you and your opponent will fight in limbo for the rest of eternity. It's so metal. This technique technically has a lot of rules, and just like with the curse seals, I've made a whole video about it. But essentially, the user can only pull out as much soul from the other person as they have in terms of chakra levels. Let's say I have 80 chakra and you have 100. That means I can only pull out 80% of your soul. Now that's usually fine because 80% of your soul is only going to leave you with your hands and your feet. But in cases like Orochimaru's, where Hiruzen had so much less chakra than Orochimaru, he was only able to get his arms. On top of all of this, the Shinigami is invisible to the person you're using it on until the Shinigami has grabbed their soul. And then once the Shinigami grabs their soul, the person whose soul you grabbed cannot move or use chakra. However, since this jutsu does kill the user, it is a kinjutsu, unless you use it to save the village, and then good job. The next jutsu we have isn't quite as metal, but it is still terrifying. Next up, we have Earth Grudge Fear. Earth Grudge Fear is a kinjutsu specific to the land hidden by the waterfalls, and it's a kinjutsu that Kakuzo stole after he killed the village elders and left the village. This jutsu is an earth release, and it essentially makes your body no longer meat and flesh, but ragdolly black thick threads. And you can manipulate all of these ragdolly black thick threads. You can use these threads to sew up any injuries you or your friends may incur, and this can go so far as reattaching lost body parts. You can attach your own limbs and fling them at people or use them to grab things far away. You can even feed your threads into the underground and have them come up from under your enemy. But truly, the best use of these threads is the fact that it basically grants the user immortality as long as they're willing to kill people. Essentially, you can use these threads to rip out the organs of people you've killed and put them inside of you. Because you can replace your own organs with new fresh organs, you can essentially live forever. And once you take the organs of other people, you actually get their nature releases, which is why Kakuzo has all 5 basic nature releases. Because Kakuzo now has 5 hearts, you have to destroy all 5 hearts in order to kill it, making him pseudo-immortal. This technique is banned because it requires a sacrifice and also because it goes against the laws of nature. Next up, did you think we were gonna have Evening Elephant and not have the 8 gates on here? It's not like there's just certain techniques you use with the 8 gates that are kinjutsu. All of 8 gates is kinjutsu, which, by the way, once again covered. The 8 gates works by tapping into 8 central tenketsu points throughout your body. Once you override each of these tenketsu points, which are technically identified as chakra limiters, you get more access to 100% of your total chakra. You see, the average person actually only accesses about 20% of their total chakra. This is to say that people like Naruto and Sasuke and Sakura aren't actually dealing with 100% of their chakra. In the same way that you and me aren't dealing with 100% of our strength at any given moment, because using 100% of our strength leaves us liable to muscle tears. And in the 8 gates, there is 8 gates to go through. And as you make your way down incrementally through these 8 gates, you get access to more chakra and faster healing and more speed and the ability to do certain things like the Evening Elephant. However, as you move incrementally down these gates, you also open yourself up to more risk. Moving at speeds that high or punching that hard is going to break bones and tear muscles. And therefore, the first 7 gates violate the first rule, which is putting the user at risk. However, the 8th gate, which gives you 100 times boost on your chakra, violates an additional rule, which is the fact that it costs the user their life. Oh, buddy, do you get to be the big dog for about 2 minutes. And since we're talking about the 8 gates, we might as well talk about another technique used by Rock Lee and Mike Guy, the front lotus. The front lotus requires you to kick your opponent up into the air, and once they've reached the apex of their flight, you come up behind them and wrap them up in bandages. You then begin to spin your opponent in a head-first collision with the ground. And right before your opponent's head hits the ground, you ditch them so your head doesn't hit the ground and you retreat to safety. However, to pull off this technique, at least one of the 8 gates needs to be open. And because at least one of the 8 gates need to be opened, the user is most likely to be fatigued, which is going to leave them open to attacks. And because using this jutsu leaves you vulnerable to attack and also puts you in danger, because remember, you are also still spinning at the ground, head down, you are in danger. And therefore, it violates the first rule, putting the user in danger. That was fun how we did all those canon ones, wasn't it? I enjoyed it. It's over now. Too bad. With that being said, out of all of the filler kinjutsu, I believe this one is probably the coolest. This kinjutsu is called Fury. This jutsu is kind of insane. It just makes people human nukes. Essentially, Fury is just a technique that allows a user to make a massive explosion. We're talking like Tail Beasts level explosion. Essentially, it was created by this guy named Enno Goija, and he implanted this kinjutsu on both himself and his granddaughter. However, they can't just walk around and explode a bunch of places. In order to pull off Fury, you have to release the kinjutsu seal. You have to use, and I'm gonna have to read this, Tsuchigumu style Forbidden Life technique release creation of heaven and earth, which essentially releases the seal on their back and then pulls in a massive amount of nature chakra from the surrounding area to power up what would be Fury's explosion. And then after you get enough nature chakra, you just explode. Like, you don't explode, like everything around you explodes. This explosion is big enough to wipe entire villages off the map. So Hiruzen saw that and he was like, oh, no. How about we make that one a kinjutsu? And it makes sense because of the level of mass destruction it's capable of causing. But if, oh, I don't know, Naruto were to learn it, certainly has no problem pulling in nature chakra. God, if Jugo was able to learn it, it's one of those techniques I'm gonna make a video about one day. And now we're back to canon stuff. Up next, we have the Hidden Stone Kinjutsu. Yes, that's the name. This is the kinjutsu that Deidara has. You know, the reason he's got hand mouths? This kinjutsu has been passed down through generations in Iwa, and it essentially allows users to knead their own chakra into materials. Not just clay, common misconception. And by kneading their chakra into materials, they can form that material into something that they can control remotely. And this can be on the scale of something nano-sized or on the scale of a C2 dragon. You see, actually, the only thing that allows Deidara to explode his clay is A, that it's explosive clay, and B, that he has explosion release. His hand mouths technically have nothing to do with it. His hand mouths just allow him to create and control his creations. This technique was banned because it goes against the laws of nature, sort of. Essentially, you're like pseudo giving life to inanimate objects by kneading your chakra into it and controlling it. But not even really, because you are controlling it and they don't really have free will. Not really any different from like a mud clone or a wood clone. I'm actually stumped as to why this one's a kinjutsu. Regardless, I'm sure as to why these next two are kinjutsu, because our next two are Izanami and Izanagi. Izanagi is a genjutsu casted by a Sharingan wielder. Essentially, it's a yin-yang release that allows a Sharingan wielder to rewrite reality. Let's say you stab me in the heart, and I don't like that very much. I can choose to make the reality we are currently standing in a genjutsu dissolve the body you just stabbed and recreate my body somewhere else. This isn't even a one-time thing. Depending on how much chakra you have or how strong you are as a person, Izanagi can last up to 1.5 minutes, meaning that for a full 1.5 minutes, basically reality is in my hands. It doesn't matter if you stab me, shoot me, rip me in half, I can make that body not real, project my consciousness and my imagination somewhere else and create a physical body somewhere there. And it's largely implied that this doesn't only apply to your body. It's stated that the reason that Izanami was made is because Uchihas were using this ability to get what they want, not just keep themselves alive. So let's say that hypothetically somebody got elected as village leader and you didn't like that very much. You could activate Izanagi and change reality such that you're in charge. You could do this by deleting the person that got elected, manipulating the vote, anything. Like I said, for 1.5 minutes, reality is yours. But because this was such a widespread problem, Izanami was created. You see, Izanami is also a genjutsu, just like Izanagi. However, Izanami doesn't change reality. It makes you accept it. Essentially, by making a feedback loop of 3 different events. Let's say you and me are fighting, and you punch me in the chest, I give you a slap on the face, and you take my glasses off. If I can punch you in the face once again and start the cycle over of those 3 events while activating Izanami, I put you in a timeless loop. By the way, I have an entire video about Izanami and Izanagi as well, where I do a much better job explaining it. But essentially, by marking certain events throughout the duration of our fight, or even just our day, I can put you into an endless loop where you will see these events over and over and over again. The purpose of Izanami is that it's endless until the person put in Izanami realizes why they've been put in Izanami and accepts it. So you will be in an endless loop until you accept your circumstances. Essentially meaning that until you change as a person and accept the world as it is, you will never break out of genjutsu. The problem with both Izanagi and Izanami, though, is that it blinds your eye. And those are a prized possession of the Uchiha, and therefore they labeled it kinjutsu. Our next entry on the list is arguably our most metal, like more than Death Reaper Seal, I'm not kidding. Our next entry on the list is Jar of Poison. Essentially, this is a jutsu that can only be used by Tarune. Tarune is Danzo's right-hand man, his favorite Aburame. And as Danzo's right-hand man, he's gonna have some just downright evil jutsus at his disposal. And most of these jutsus are gonna be made to do one thing and one thing only: kill a lot of people. And that's exactly what the Jar of Poison technique does. Essentially, the Jar of Poison technique requires Tarune to gather a bunch of infected corpses. And when I say a bunch, I don't mean like 10 or 12, I mean hundreds. And then erect a barrier around these infected corpses. And as these infected corpses decay, they will release a gas, which will eventually ignite. And the ignition of this gas acts as a catalyst for a bunch of poisoned bugs to blow all across an entire landscape. It's bio-warfare. So essentially, Tarune creates the world's most dangerous and poisonous bug by using a pit of bodies, and then once all of the gas is released from the body and explodes, those bugs are flung everywhere. I'll give you one guess as to why this isn't allowed. Did you guess it requires a bunch of sacrifices and also mass destruction? Good job! Up next, we got a pretty obvious one as well: living corpse reincarnation. I'll give you one guess who made this one. Did you guess Orochimaru? Living corpse reanimation essentially immortalizes your mind. Essentially, once you master living corpse reincarnation, your mind is no longer the gray matter that exists in your skull. Think of it more as like a thumb drive you can download into somebody else. And that's exactly what Orochimaru has done. Orochimaru is trying to be immortal so he can figure out every single jutsu on Earth. But he understands he can't do this in one lifetime, so he had to find a way to be eternal. The only problem is Orochimaru has to transfer his consciousness to a new and living body. But he can only do this once every 3 years. But it seems after 3 years, the person he transfers himself to begins to die as a host. Essentially, what we've seen from Orochimaru is after 3 years, the soul and body of the person he's taken over begin to fight back or decay. Which is why he's always looking for a perfect host in either Kimimaro or Sasuke or Itachi, because he believes he'll be able to inhabit their body for more than 3 years. The only problem is the reason that this is called living corpse reincarnation is that the second Orochimaru takes over your body, you are dead. The entire time you're in there with Orochimaru, are. He is technically just kind of glommed onto your body. But the second that he leaves you, and therefore this jutsu required a sacrifice, and that's why it's a kinjutsu. Also, you could probably sprinkle some laws of nature on there as well. Speaking of dead people doing things, the next thing up is mutually multiplying explosive tags. This is kind of like Evening Elephant in that it's a jutsu used in a kinjutsu. Essentially, this is kind of what Tobirama created Edo Tensei for. Tobirama would Edo Tensei back just basically anybody, but he would have control over them. Tobirama would make his Edo Tensei warriors out of explosive tags, and then he would send them to the front lines. He would then have those explosive tags explode, but here's the thing, Edo Tensei people technically can't die, and they will continue to regenerate, but they're regenerating with explosive tags. So as they explode, they have to regenerate, but they're regenerating with more explosive tags, so it's an infinite loop of explosions. This is why Tobirama wasn't particularly focused on who he was reincarnating, as long as they could explode, and everybody can do that. So the thing is, this being an Edo Tensei technique, technically it goes against the laws of nature, but also mass destruction. But enough about all that canon stuff, let's talk filler, but specifically the best filler of OG Naruto. Yeah, we're talking the mysterious peacock method. Hidden Star Village, baby. This technique is the trademark technique of the village hidden in the stars, because in order to use it, you need to use chakra boosting radiation that fell from the meteorite 200 years ago, and that meteorite is located in the village hidden in the stars. That's why it's called the village hidden in the stars. This technique appears sort of like chakra peacock feathers behind the ninja using it, and these feathers can be manipulated into a bunch of different shapes. Think of the way that Gaara uses his sand. Essentially, the people from the hidden star village can do this with just their chakra. They can form wings, or a beast, or a dragon, or a chakra rope. Hell, if the star ninja actually find that they're close to death, they can write a symbol on the ground and then use the remaining bits of their chakra to come back to life in a ghost form and kill whoever killed them. So there's just a lot you can do with this radiation that boosts your chakra. Only problem with radiation is, ask Chernobyl, radiation poisoning. In order to get better at this technique, you had to train in the presence of the meteorite, but the meteorite had radiation. And so everybody who trained in this technique was just dying of radiation poisoning. And so, since using the technique put the user at risk, it was a kinjutsu. But since we're talking about putting the user's life at risk, that is quite literally the entire point of this next jutsu, one's own life jutsu. See, this was a jutsu made by the Hidden Sand Village, and technically it was made in order to give life to puppets. Essentially, the Hidden Sand Village was sick of having to train people to control puppets, so they wanted sentience in their puppets. And if they had sentience in their puppets, they wouldn't have to worry about the shinobis dying. So they put a lot of time and effort into this jutsu, until they finally figured out how to do it. The only problem was, in order to bring that puppet to life, essentially somebody had to give the entirety of their life force to that puppet by using their chakra as an intermediary. So in order for that puppet to come to life, somebody has to die. Realizing that this was absolutely going to be a kinjutsu because it requires a sacrifice, the Hidden Sand nixed the idea. But fortunately, Granny Chiyo was able to use this on Gaara, and that's how we got Gaara back. But speaking of being saved from death, next up we have Night Guy. Night Guy, just like Evening Elephant or mutually multiplying explosive tags, is a kinjutsu within a kinjutsu. Except Night Guy is the biggest of the bads. Essentially, Night Guy can only be used if you've opened all 8 gates. And it can only be used if you've opened all 8 gates because there's a couple things you have to do to use Night Guy. One, you have to amass an enormous amount of chakra. But this chakra is so hot that it quite literally boils the blood within your body and then amasses around you as a red cloud of quite literally vaporized blood. And then you have to flow that chakra into a kick. A kick, mind you, that is so fast that it bends space-time. Technically isn't how speed works. It's how mass works. So the only justification I can really explain for it is that he amasses so much chakra that his density becomes so heavy that it can bend space-time ahead of him. But in order to visibly bend space-time, you would have to be like roughly the mass of a planet, which explains why Madara feared for his life when he got hit by Night Guy. But Night Guy basically kills you. I mean, you're already gonna die because you opened the 8th gate, but using Night Guy significantly shortens how much time you have left. And therefore, because it puts the user at risk, it's a kinjutsu. But if you have about a minute and a half to live and your blood is vaporizing out of your skin, I don't think you're worried about the rules. And just like that, we're down to our final 3. I left the big hitters for last. Third to last, we have Edo Tensei. Yes, we've talked mutually multiplying explosive tags, but we haven't talked Edo Tensei itself. Just like with so many other kinjutsu on this list, I have a whole video explaining Edo Tensei, but that's that's boring, so let's explain it here. Actually, the video's not boring. It's very good. Please watch it. Edo Tensei was created by Tobirama and essentially allowed him to yank souls out of heaven and bring them back to Earth. Tobirama, while doing research of God knows what kind, was essentially able to build a bridge between the Pure Lands, which is canonical Naruto heaven, and Earth. The only problem is, if your soul is not in the Pure Lands, Tobirama can't get to you. It's only a bridge to the Pure Lands. But how does Tobirama or any user of Edo Tensei get you to come back from heaven? Well, it actually doesn't require as much as you would think. All you need is a living body. They can't be dead, a sealing scroll, and to know the hand signs to Edo Tensei. On top of that, you just need DNA from whoever you're trying to reincarnate. You put their DNA on the sealing scroll, and then the sealing scroll will spread out around your living person, and then dust and debris from the surrounding area will mat onto that person and create the person you're trying to reincarnate, whose soul will be ripped out of heaven and smashed into that body. This instantly kills whoever you're using to reincarnate, by the way. But what's weird is they're technically in there the whole time. Like, you know when you see Tobirama or anybody get sliced in half as an Edo Tensei form? What's weird is there's still a body in there, and it doesn't matter how mangled they get. Once the Edo Tensei releases, that person is just completely fine. Like, not fine, they're dead, but their body is all put together. And by bringing this person back, they have infinite chakra refills, which basically just means they don't have more chakra than when they were alive, but it always is refilling, and instant regeneration. They literally cannot be killed. But for obvious reasons, like you have to sacrifice somebody to the dust gods, this is kinjutsu. Up second to last, we have one of the most popular jutsus in the entirety of this show, multi-shadow clone jutsu. You see, regular shadow clone jutsu is not kinjutsu. Like, I don't know what the actual cutoff is for how many clones you're allowed to have, but I know whatever Naruto's doing is definitely kinjutsu. But for real though, when does shadow clone jutsu become multiple shadow clone jutsu? Is it 100? Regardless, multiple shadow clone jutsu is forbidden because shadow clones split chakra equally with the user of shadow clone. So if you have 2 shadow clones, everybody's got a third of your whole chakra. Problem is, if you do this with 100 clones, everybody has 1% of your chakra. That's a problem because having 1% of your chakra basically means you're dead. We've seen a lot of people die of chakra depletion, Kakashi, Nagato. So putting yourself in a situation where you only have 1% of your total chakra probably means you're gonna die of chakra depletion. And because of that precarious situation, it is a kinjutsu. And then last but not least, we have another one of Naruto's jutsus, one of the 2 kinjutsus he loves to use so much. We got Rasenshuriken, ladies and gentlemen. Rasenshuriken is a Rasengan that has had wind nature added to it. Doesn't sound that dangerous, right? It's actually really not that dangerous. Essentially, Naruto was upset that his Rasengan wasn't throwable, and that he would need to get real up close and personal with anybody he wanted to hit with the Rasengan, literally an arm length away. And while this worked for Pops, because he could teleport, it doesn't work for Naruto. So Naruto eventually learned how to add a basic chakra nature to the Rasengan, something that Minato had been trying to do his entire life, mind you. Something Kakashi tried to do, and that's actually how he made the Raikiri. Well, I guess technically he made the Chidori, and then it became Raikiri. It's weird. Regardless, Naruto figured something out that both Minato and Kakashi couldn't figure out, and that was adding wind's nature to the Rasengan. And because of that, it became a shuriken that he could throw. Only problem with shurikens is they're sharp, and so was Naruto's. The problem is that the wind nature that Naruto added to the Rasenshuriken was so sharp it would damage his own hand by holding it. And this damage was cellular level. It was actually disrupting his own chakra network in his hands. And because of the danger this presented to Naruto, Tsunade deemed it a kinjutsu. And that changed literally nothing. And now, technically, it doesn't hurt him at all. Like, we've just completely forgot that Rasenshuriken ever hurt Naruto. He spams it left, right, and center, and he's completely fine. Hashtag Kishimoto forgot. And that's it. That's every single kinjutsu in Naruto. Once again, shout out to Anime Senpai Comparison for making the list for me to read and explain to all of you. If you guys like this old school style video from NC Hammer 23, guys, please, from me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Listen, I'm not saying that you might as well just label any jutsu that's remotely cool kinjutsu, but starting to sound like the 7th reason.